This kind of meal doesn't compare to fine French dining. My daughter started throwing the food I had prepared into the kitchen trash. We don't need simple meals like this. I'll clean it up for you. Compared to the meal we just had, this is garbage. Though I had been ridiculed for my lack of education, today's treatment was unbearable. I stormed out of the house and contacted a certain person. This would lead to the downfall of both my husband and my daughter's lives. My name is Anne. Due to family circumstances, I had to drop out of school and start working, eventually leaving the job I loved when I got married. The company that hired me despite my lack of education had been a comfort, but Tom, my husband whom I met through a friend, was possessive and forced me to quit, saying he would provide for us. Since then, I've been a housewife, living with our daughter Rosa and Tom. Rosa recently got into a prestigious school in the area. She is an excellent student aiming to become a lawyer, studying hard for law school. However, she has a problem. She's become arrogant, perhaps too proud of her academic achievements, and has a tendency to look down on others. I've repeatedly told her to stop being condescending, especially towards those she deems less intelligent, but she never listens. When I sought Tom's help, he didn't see her attitude as an issue. Tom is a manager at a company and rarely comes home. When he does, he dotes on Rosa instead of disciplining her. In contrast, we hardly talk as a couple. I've long told myself his work keeps him busy, but sometimes he comes home with the scent of perfume, constantly on his smartphone, making me suspect he's having an affair. As a housewife, I often feel my voice goes unheard in the household. You've been coming home late lately. Is work that busy? Huh? Work is always busy. Whatever you're suspecting, it's none of your business, Anne. When I casually asked, Tom's response was always dismissive and aggressive. If I confronted him about cheating, he'd likely just feign ignorance. Both Tom and Rosa have increasingly disregarded me since Rosa entered high school and became more obsessed with academic status. Rosa, could you help with the chores? I think I have a fever. I had been feeling unwell all morning. Despite trying to get through the daily tasks, my dizzy spells made it impossible. I asked her for help when she returned from school. Why should I do chores? It's your job, Mom. You're a housewife with nothing else to do, so at least keep up with the housework. With that, she went straight to her room upstairs. It seemed my poor health didn't matter to her. She used to be more considerate. Tom's influence had turned her into a selfish and arrogant person. While I tried to raise her to be self-reliant, Tom spoiled her endlessly. He gave her allowance without limits and bought her anything she wanted. Even when I warned that this would make her spoiled, Tom never stopped indulging her, insisting she should have whatever she wanted. And before I knew it, Rosa started to mock me. Tom, who graduated from a prestigious university, values education highly and has a lot of pride. It was clearly his influence. Mom, it's so embarrassing that you dropped out of college. All my friends' parents graduated from well-known universities. I can't even tell anyone about you. I might have dropped out, but I got a job and earned my own money. I'm not ashamed of that. Yeah, but it was probably at some small company where you didn't earn much. Looking at you really makes me realize how important education is. It's good you married Dad. Otherwise, you'd be living in poverty. It's terrible to talk like that. People who belittle others over education are the ones who are truly low-level. I usually don't talk back much, but the harshness of her words made me react without thinking. Even if you talk back, it's not convincing at all. Yeah. Why are you so angry? It's the truth. If you were so upset, you should have at least graduated high school, Anne. Tom knows why I couldn't continue my education, yet he joins her in mocking me instead of scolding her. I also once aimed to become a doctor, studying hard for my dreams just like Rosa. I was good at studying, my grades were excellent, and people said it was a given that I would get into a top-tier school, even more competitive than hers. However, when I was in middle school, my father died suddenly in an accident. Losing the breadwinner, my mother became a single parent, and I had no choice but to give up on further education and drop out to work. I never intended to tell Rosa this, but it was clear she would call me a liar even if I did. She would surely mock me, calling it an excuse. Why did things turn out this way? We promised to build a modest but happy family when we got married. Now, far from happiness, I felt alienated in my own home. Contrary to their attitude towards me, the two of them got along well because they were so alike. They often went out together on purpose, leaving me behind. At first, I felt lonely, but recently, I've become numb to such treatment, feeling nothing. However, when I think about continuing a life where my family treats me like a housekeeper, I become very depressed. In addition to my relationship with Rosa and Tom, there was another person causing me headaches. That was my sister Betty. Maybe feeling lonely after losing our father, Betty left home after graduating middle school and started seeing multiple men. Even after becoming an adult, she continued such a lifestyle without holding a steady job, frequently coming to me to ask for money. Again. I sighed as I saw the unexpected visitor on the doorbell screen. I drank too much yesterday. Hey, give me some water. Betty, clearly drunk even in the middle of the day, sprawled out on my living room sofa. Despite being older than me, she looked sloppy and dressed too young for her age, being in her late 30s. Reeking of alcohol and strong perfume, Betty asked me for $500, saying she lost all her money gambling this month. Don't gamble if you're not working. But my boyfriend loves slots. When I'm with him, the money just disappears. I can't help it. Without any sign of remorse, she demanded money, and I reluctantly handed her an envelope with cash. Betty was the type of person who would go on a rampage if I didn't give her money, so this was the easiest way to deal with her. Once, I refused her demands because they were becoming too frequent, and an enraged Betty went on a destructive spree, breaking furniture and dishes until I agreed to pay her. Thanks. You really are the most dependable sister. And you've always been so convenient. I'll come by again when I'm in trouble, okay? Taking the money, Betty left, looking pleased with herself. As she said, I've always been used. Everyone around me knew that I wouldn't stand up for myself, so they all took advantage of me. Hey, did Betty come over again? Rosa, who must have passed Betty outside, asked with a look of disdain. Welcome back. Yeah, just a bit. I tried to gloss over it, but Rosa knew that Betty came over whenever she was in need of money. It was for money again, wasn't it? You know, you two are really alike. Both of you are so awful. The only decent people in this family are Dad and me. As usual, Rosa made her sarcastic remarks, and I didn't bother to respond. I knew that whatever I said would just come back at me tenfold. Tom, Rosa, and Betty were all sources of distress for me. Time passed, and Rosa, having studied hard, got into her dream college. Even though she often said hurtful things, she was still my precious daughter. I decided to celebrate by making her favorite dishes and ordering from a fancy steakhouse. I told Tom and Rosa that we'd celebrate at home with a special meal. But when the time came, neither of them returned home. The food on the table grew colder and colder. They finally came home late that night. That was delicious. Thanks, Dad. It was a reward for all your hard work, Rosa. I splurged. It was really great. Let's go again sometime. I heard them chatting happily at the door. Oh, what's this? We've already eaten. Rosa walked into the living room and saw the meal I had prepared, then gave a mocking smile. It seemed they had gone out to eat without me. Didn't I tell you? Rosa and I went out for a celebratory French dinner. You didn't tell me that. And I told both of you I was preparing a special meal for tonight. They smirked, clearly enjoying my reaction. Maybe you forgot because you're so dumb, Mom. Obviously, high-end French cuisine is better than some ordinary steak. You're really such an airhead, Rosa said, starting to throw the steak I had made into the kitchen trash. What are you doing? It's a special day, and I don't want to see a gloomy face or some cheap meal. I'll clean it up for you. Rosa, that's too much. But honestly, compared to what we had earlier, this stuff is trash. If you were going to prepare something, it should have been better. The food I had lovingly prepared, including Rosa's favorite dishes, mercilessly thrown away. Why? I can't believe this. How can you do this? Do you hate me that much? Everything I had been holding back poured out. And I couldn't help but raise my voice. That's the attitude that's so annoying. Just because you're my mom, don't boss me around. You're a dropout and a low-level person. Whenever Rosa and I argued, she always said this. To Rosa, it didn't matter that I was her mother. Any opinion from someone she deemed less intelligent was worthless. I wish I had a smarter, more respectable mom. I wish I could replace you with someone else. That's a great idea. You can go ahead and replace me. Tom laughed at the idea. As I listened to their conversation, I realized that there was no place for me in this house anymore. Fine. I can't live with you anymore after being treated like this. I'm leaving. With those words, I left the living room and went to my bedroom to start packing. Why are you being so dramatic? I was just telling the truth. Don't get so mad. We don't need her here anyway. If you're expecting us to beg you to stay, think again. They looked at me with smug expressions, not bothering to stop me. They clearly thought they'd be just fine without me. Once I finished packing, I turned to Rosa, who still had that infuriating look on her face. Rosa, you may be smart and clever, but you lack any sense of empathy. What? Are you, a dropout, trying to lecture me? What kind of tone is that? Tom yelled at me, but I held her gaze and spoke firmly. Do you really think someone who looks down on and mocks others can be a lawyer? I believe you're the last person who should ever become one. A lawyer is supposed to help those in need, to support the vulnerable. But Rosa had absorbed Tom's values, showing no hesitation in belittling and hurting others. No matter how intelligent she was, I couldn't see her as fit to be a lawyer. I had tried to correct her behavior over the years. But as she grew older, she began to boast about her intelligence, ignoring my pleas for kindness. With Tom indulging her, Rosa had become an irredeemably selfish person. It seems I've failed as a part of this family, so I'll leave as you wish. Don't worry. As Rosa suggested, I'll call the real mom and let her know to come here. I smiled at their shocked faces and walked out with my packed bags. I started walking towards my parents' house. On the way, I called someone. I told them to go to the house where Tom and Rosa were waiting. How does a dropout plan to live on her own? Tom still couldn't resist making snide remarks, showing no remorse as I left. Finally, I feel relieved. Rosa, on the other hand, was a bit shaken but tried to maintain a strong front. Despite all the times she had insulted me, she hadn't really expected me to leave. Dad, what did Mom mean by the real mom? What's going on? Well, that's... Tom stammered in response to Rosa's question. As the awkward silence stretched, the doorbell rang. Is it Mom? I bet she came back because she couldn't handle it, Rosa said as she headed to the door and opened it hastily. But it wasn't me standing there, it was my sister, Betty. With her unkempt hair and overwhelming perfume, Betty hugged a bewildered Rosa and said I could stay here from now on. Nice to meet you, Rosa. Rosa thought Betty's obnoxious grin looked disturbingly similar to her own. Betty walked in and made herself at home in the living room. Unable to stand it, Rosa called me. Mom, what's going on? Why is Betty coming to our house? Why? What a strange question. Didn't you say you wanted a different mom? So, I brought your real mom. My real mom? I explained everything to a confused Rosa. When Tom was in college, he got Betty, who was then in high school, pregnant. After giving birth to Rosa, the two were still students and had no financial means. So, Betty and my mother took care of the baby, but Betty soon abandoned Tom and Rosa and started dating other men. Later, the smooth-talking Tom tricked his sister, me, into marrying him. Since I couldn't have children, I adopted Rosa, who was still very young. No! That's a lie! It's all true. If you don't believe me, ask your dad and Betty. No! I can't believe this woman is my mom. Come back, Mom! Please! You wanted a different mom, right? Well, this is your real mom, Rosa. The three of you should live together happily. And with that, I hung up the phone. Later, I sent a letter explaining that I would never return home again, along with divorce papers to Tom. As expected, Tom, who had a mistress, agreed to the divorce, and we became strangers. Due to his promiscuous behavior, Tom and Betty didn't get along even after their breakup. Tom left Rosa behind and moved in with his mistress. He practically abandoned the household, only sending the minimum amount of money to cover living expenses. Betty tracked down Tom's apartment where he lived with his mistress and demanded proper financial support. When Tom refused, Betty caused a scene, leading to neighbors calling the police, and it turned into a minor scandal. Rumors spread, and Tom's affair became public knowledge. Given the strict compliance policies at his company, Tom was transferred to a regional branch. His income drastically decreased as he was demoted from an executive at headquarters to a regular employee. Unable to afford college tuition, Rosa had to get a part-time job. However, Rosa, who had never done a part-time job or even helped much at home, kept making mistakes at work and quickly switched jobs. As a result, she couldn't save enough for her tuition. She asked her high school friends for loans, but her arrogant attitude had alienated them, and they refused to help. In fact, rumors spread about her asking for money, and she became an outcast among her former classmates. Unbeknownst to Rosa, Tom had only been providing the bare minimum for household expenses. While we managed to get by, Betty wouldn't be able to handle such a situation. Mom! I might have to drop out of college. Help me! Talk to your real mom, Rosa. I'm just a stranger now. Don't call me Mom only when it's convenient for you. I had lost my patience with her, who had broken down and come crying to me, so I coldly told her off. After the divorce with Tom was finalized, I made him promise not to have any further contact with me in exchange for not demanding any alimony. I heard that Tom had continued his relationship with his mistress for a while, but after being demoted and experiencing a pay cut, he was unceremoniously dumped by her. With no other option, Tom returned to the house where Betty and Rosa lived, but apparently, Betty wasn't doing any housework at all, and sometimes even brought men home, living recklessly. When he tried to kick her out, she would go into a rage, and he found himself at a loss for what to do. Rosa, in the end, couldn't pay her tuition by the deadline and had to drop out of college. Now she's working as an office clerk at a small factory, but most of her salary is taken by Betty. I moved back to my parents' home while searching for a new job. With a gap in my resume and the fact that I dropped out of college, my job search wasn't going well. But one day, a former colleague from the company I used to work for, who had started his own business, reached out and asked if I would work for him. I happily accepted the offer and am now studying hard and working to fill the gap in my skills. I've always liked studying and am a quick learner. Recognizing my efforts, I've now been given a leadership position. In my previous life, I was looked down upon, mocked, and resigned myself to the belief that I couldn't do anything. But now, I realize that was wrong and that if you put in the effort, you can open up a brighter future. There's even someone who likes my forward-looking attitude, and we've been dating steadily. I sometimes regret that I didn't teach Rosa, who was once my daughter, the value of effort before it was too late. But she is an adult now. I hope that, through her experiences in this tough world, she will eventually realize her mistakes. I'm not setting a place for you at the wedding, so this is goodbye. Right after landing at the airport, Harper, my sister-in-law, said this with a triumphant laugh. Today was Harper's wedding day in South Korea. I had come all the way to Korea with my husband and in-laws, but Harper's words were directed solely at me. What do you mean by that? I asked, shaken, to which Harper replied bluntly. Why would I invite you to the ceremony? I didn't even book a hotel for you. Why don't you sleep outside or just go back home? My name is Ava. I'm 30 years old, and I've been married to Joseph, who is the same age, for a year. We met at a social drinking event after becoming working adults, hit it off, and soon started dating. We had our share of fights during our relationship, but my love for Joseph never waned, and I happily nodded yes when he proposed. After marrying, I started living with Joseph and his parents in their house. However, as soon as we started living together, I began to be treated horribly by Joseph and my in-laws. First off, I discovered that Joseph held male chauvinistic views. I had felt demeaned by him even when we were dating, which often led to arguments, but living together, he stopped hiding his true nature. Hey, have you finished the chores? What are you lazing around for? It's a wife's job to take care of her husband and his family. Get to it. He'd often yell at me. Although he had chauvinistic views, he seemed to care about his family, treating his mother, Rachel, and his older sister, Harper, equally. The in-laws, too, looked at me coldly. Especially Rachel's bullying was severe. She's a housewife, but ever since I moved in, I've never seen her do any housework. She seemed opposed to our marriage from the start and constantly made snide remarks at me. Initially, it was just about the chores, but then she started complaining about my job too. You know, if you have time to work outside, why don't you do some housework? You should quit that hobby-like job that doesn't even bring in a decent income. Led by Rachel, the in-laws always said I should spend more time on housework than working outside. But I do my share of the chores diligently. I suspect Rachel knows this and just looks for excuses to criticize me. Really, what's so fun about being a piano teacher? It was clear from her attitude that she disliked even my job. I've been working as a piano teacher at a music school since graduating from university. The school is managed by someone else, and I'm an employee there. I've loved playing the piano since I was young and went to a music college. I once aspired to be a pianist but realized early on that I lacked the talent, so I took my current job on the recommendation of a college professor. I love the atmosphere at the piano school and have built good relationships with students and their families. I enjoy teaching piano to children and feel more relaxed at work than at home. While we were dating, Joseph admired and supported my job, but that admiration is nowhere to be seen now. Despite the constant pressure from my in-laws and Joseph to quit, I dream of opening my piano school in the future and have no plans to become a housewife. Harper, too, seems to dislike my presence, always looking at me with disdain. Why would someone like you marry Joseph? You should just divorce him. But then we'd lose someone to do the chores, which would be troublesome. That's a typical taunt from Harper. She works at a company and, using her busy schedule as an excuse, does no housework. Now that I'm living with them, she has even started dumping all her laundry and room cleaning on me. John, my father-in-law, rarely complains directly, but he seems to enjoy watching Rachel and Harper bully me. Because of this toxic environment, I don't feel like I belong in this house and am seriously considering divorcing Joseph. Then, one day, Harper's wedding was announced. I wasn't surprised to hear that Harper might be getting married soon, as I'd been hearing about it daily, but I was taken aback that her fiancé was wealthy and they planned to have the wedding abroad. The location was South Korea. So, it was decided that we, as a family, would travel to Korea. Korea, huh? I've never been there. This should be exciting. Rachel was thrilled. Joseph and John were also excited about the trip to Korea, and Harper seemed proud. However, I wasn't too keen on the idea. I had never traveled with the in-laws before, but I could already imagine how they would treat me. Still, there was one thing about this ceremony I was looking forward to. So, I tried not to think too much about the in-laws or Joseph and decided to attend the wedding with a positive attitude. On the day of departure, I was unsurprisingly made the in-laws' baggage handler. On the plane, while the in-laws and Joseph chatted happily, I was left out, feeling uncomfortable all the way to Korea. We had taken a night flight, so it was just before noon when we landed. The fresh air of a new place lifted my spirits as I stepped off the plane, but right after collecting our luggage, Harper hit me with something I never saw coming. Thanks for handling the luggage. I didn't set a place for you at the wedding, so this is goodbye. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing at first. Harper was laughing triumphantly, and the in-laws and Joseph were looking at me with disdainful smiles. What do you mean? I managed to ask, flustered. Why would I invite someone like you to the ceremony? I didn't even book a hotel for you. Harper then said. I was so shocked that I couldn't speak. Joseph and the in-laws started laughing. As I bit my lip in frustration, Harper continued. You wouldn't fit in at a fancy hotel anyway. Sleep on the streets if you don't like it. Or just go back. She said this with a dismissive laugh, and I started to tear up, remembering all the awful treatment I'd received from them. How could such injustice be allowed? Neither the in-laws nor Joseph defended me, just laughed as if they wanted me to leave quickly. I felt utterly alone. Reaching my limit, I made a decision and told the in-laws. All right, I'll go back. Then in-laws and Joseph burst into loud laughter, echoing through the airport. Oh, good riddance. It feels refreshing without the dead weight, Rachel said. Yeah, you better go back and do some chores. John joined in. Joseph mocked. Get going. And of course, you're paying for your own return flight. After that, they took their luggage and left me at the airport. Fuming, I watched their retreating figures. Luckily, I found a flight back to America with available seats for today and quickly made the arrangements to return home. After getting back, I went to get divorce papers and spent my time tidying up and doing chores while on leave from work. I decided to relax alone while the in-laws were away. The in-laws' house, which I usually dreaded returning to, felt comfortable in their absence. A few days later, Joseph and the in-laws returned home. As soon as they opened the door, Hey Ava! What the hell have you done? Joseph yelled. I, playing with my mobile phone in the living room, just shrugged secretly. Their loud footsteps approached, and Joseph, the in-laws, and Harper appeared, all furious. Welcome back. What's wrong? Did something happen? I put down my phone and asked innocently. Then Rachel came at me. Don't play dumb! You took our passports back home with you. What were you thinking? Yelling, but I just smiled. When you told me to go back, "You didn't ask for your passports. I thought you didn't need them," and said, "Actually, I had been tasked with keeping their passports safe when we were heading to Korea. I had kept them in my bag along with other valuables, and it seemed they had completely forgotten about it." "You did that on purpose, didn't you? Do you have any idea how much trouble we went through because of that?" Joseph turned red with anger and yelled at me. It was the day before returning home that he realized he didn't have his passport, and he had to rush to the embassy to get a travel document issued for his return. Then Joseph and the in-laws started talking about the terrible time they had after I returned home. This was 3 hours after they left me at the airport. Before the wedding began, Joseph and his group headed to the hotel in South Korea where they were planning to stay, only to realize at the front desk that none of them had any money. Joseph had intended to make me pay, so he didn't bring any cash, and his credit card was maxed out at that point, so they couldn't pay for the upscale hotel. They tried borrowing money from the in-laws, but they too had assumed their son or daughter would cover their travel expenses and had no cash on hand. Panicking, Harper, who had arrived at the hotel earlier, decided to rely on her fiancé and his family. Descending to the front desk, Harper deeply apologized to her fiancé and his dad. "Please, Thomas, there's been a little mix-up, and my family's in trouble. Could you lend us some money?" Thomas, Harper's fiancé, cast a puzzled look at the apologizing Harper and Joseph's group. An uneasy tension began to brew between the in-laws and Thomas's family, and before Harper could explain, Thomas spoke up. However, what Thomas said was completely unexpected. "I've been wondering, why isn't Ava here?" "Ava? Who's Ava?" Harper and the others were confused. Thomas continued, "Ava is Layla's piano teacher. She's your sister-in-law, right, Harper?" She replied she would attend the ceremony, so why isn't she here? He said. He approached Harper. Layla is Thomas's 6-year-old daughter. As it turns out, Thomas has a history of divorce and a daughter, and she is one of my piano students. Layla started attending piano lessons this year, and I'm currently teaching her twice a week. So, I already knew Thomas. Harper, Joseph, and the in-laws, learning this fact for the first time, were shocked and at a loss for words. "So it's like that? I didn't know. Well, she fell ill suddenly and couldn't come." Harper stammered an excuse, but Thomas and his dad looked at her suspiciously. At that time, Layla was waiting in the hotel room with Thomas's mom. Thomas, doubting Harper's words. "That's strange. I didn't get any message about that. I'm quite close with Ava. She would have informed me if she couldn't make it," muttered. Then Harper, starting to panic. "She must have been too sick to contact anyone. But please, Thomas, my family can't stay at the hotel without your help. Could you lend us some money?" Changed the subject. Joseph and the in-laws also desperately pleaded with Thomas. After consulting with his dad, Thomas said, "You're hiding something about Ava. Tell me the truth and I'll lend your family the money." So, Harper and Joseph reluctantly began to explain. Thomas and his dad were obviously upset upon hearing the full story, but it was too late to cancel the wedding. With 3 cash-strapped people, the only solution was for Joseph and the in-laws to use their wedding gifts to cover the travel expenses. However, even though the wedding went on, the atmosphere remained tense, and Joseph's group had a very uncomfortable time in South Korea. "Why did you keep quiet about Thomas and his daughter?" Harper, trembling with anger, confronted me. "How could you embarrass us like this? This happened because you hid the fact that you knew Thomas and his family." Shouting in a high-pitched voice, Harper accused me. It was a surprise planned by Layla. This time, Layla was scheduled to play the piano at the reception, and I had been asked by Thomas and his family to teach her the piece she would play. That's how I first found out that Harper's fiancé was Thomas. However, if I told Harper that I knew Thomas, it might spoil the surprise. So, I kept it a secret from Harper and Joseph. Upon hearing this, Harper began to tremble and lashed out at me. Don't joke with me. What if your actions cause a divorce? I was looked down upon by his family throughout the ceremony. Then, if he mentions divorce, I'll never forgive you. This is my chance to marry into wealth. She screamed further. Did you marry Thomas for his money? I asked calmly. Emotionally charged, Harper started spilling her own schemes even though I hadn't asked. She had always desired to marry a wealthy man but never found the right match. Attending parties, she couldn't find a good match due to her high standards. So, Harper began targeting men who were rich but had a history of divorce or children. She started dating Thomas and managed to marry him. Knowing her true nature, I guessed she must have hidden it well from Thomas. If I ask for a little money, he immediately gives it to me. Where else can you find such a good man? Or should I say, a good wallet? I wouldn't have chosen a man with a history of divorce otherwise, Harper said defiantly. It was clear she loved Thomas's money, not Thomas himself. Anger boiled inside me, but I managed to ask. What about Layla? Thomas said she's very fond of you. She practiced piano hard to surprise you at the wedding. Don't you have any affection for her? Harper scoffed. Of course not. It's easier to live with them if the child likes me. But let me be clear, I never intended to become a mother to that child. Harper revealed her contempt for Thomas and his family, showing no interest in Layla. Despite Layla's effort to surprise Harper with her piano practice, Harper mocked her. I reached my limit of anger, shook off Harper's hand, and showed her my mobile phone. What? What is this? Ignoring Harper's puzzled look, I spoke into the mobile phone. Thomas, did you hear that? Your wife doesn't love you or Layla at all. Harper's face turned pale. What? You can't be serious. Actually, my mobile phone was on a call and in speaker mode. The call was with Thomas, who had been listening to the entire conversation. Wait, since when? Since you all returned home, I replied. Harper was speechless, and Joseph and the in-laws were also flustered. Thank you, Ava. That's enough. Thomas's voice came from the phone. Thomas, it's not what it seems. Harper, sweating profusely, started to make excuses. But Thomas sighed deeply and replied in disappointment. That's enough. I know you were only after my wallet and have no love for Layla. I'm disillusioned. I can't live with you anymore. And then Thomas demanded a divorce. I'll make sure to tell my parents about this incident. You don't need to come back to this house anymore. Neither you nor your parents should ever involve themselves with us again. Thomas said firmly, then thanked me and ended the call. I shrugged my shoulders and put the mobile phone in my pocket. Looking at Harper, she muttered in disbelief, "My money," and collapsed on the floor. Prioritizing money even in such a time, I was beyond words. Turning away from a dejected Harper, I glared at Joseph. I'm divorcing you too. I've already got the divorce papers, and I've signed them. I've packed my things while you were away and plan to leave immediately. I'm not going to continue being a servant for you. Reacting first to my words was Rachel. Wait a minute. Who's going to do the housework if you leave? I won't allow a divorce just because it suits you. That's right. What are you defying me for? You should just do as I say. That's what a wife is supposed to do. Rachel and then Joseph raised their voices, unleashing the frustrations I'd been holding back. I took a deep breath and shouted, all you ever think about is yourselves. I'm telling you I won't be used by you anymore. Just share the housework or something. Being a wife doesn't mean being a slave. Seeing me raise my voice like this for the first time, Joseph and the in-laws looked shocked. They must have never dreamed that the obedient me would rebel. Ignoring the stunned in-laws, I thrust the divorce papers at Joseph and left the house that day. My divorce from Joseph was finalized around the same time as Harper's. The in-laws, who had boasted about their daughter marrying a wealthy man, were now facing scorn and discomfort from neighbors after the quick divorce. Joseph, after our divorce, hurried to find a new wife, but kept being rejected at parties due to his male chauvinism. Meanwhile, I focused on my piano teaching, gaining popularity, and finally opening my own studio. I'm living a fulfilling life teaching piano to children, currently renting a space, but hoping to buy a house and open a studio there in the future. I also keep in touch with Thomas and Layla. Thomas, disillusioned by women after this incident, has no plans to remarry and is committed to raising Layla with his parents' help. Layla is attending my piano classes and is working hard. As for me, I'm not thinking about remarriage. I plan to cherish my relationships with those around me and live a fulfilling life.